Done. Started.
Good evening, all. On behalf of the Wellness Center of Indian Institute of Science, I welcome all of you to this event. Wellness Center has planned a series of events for the benefit of IISc. For the last 2 weeks, an online yoga session is being conducted by Dr. Omkar, a member of the Wellness Center team. And this is between 6 and 6:30, Monday to Friday, every day in the evening. Today, we have a planned discussion session on time management and handling deadlines during the times of COVID-19. So we will have such events once in 2 weeks. And today we have three eminent panelists and Dr. Vishwesha Guttal, a member of the Wellness Center and a faculty member at the Center for Ecological Sciences, will be the moderator. Over to you, Dr. Vishwesha.
Thank you, Professor Anil Kumar. Hello, everyone, and it's a great pleasure to be moderating this session on behalf of the IISc Wellness Center. So today we have three panelists who will help us address questions and concerns regarding time management and deadlines during the times of COVID when we are working under extremely unusual circumstances. And this may continue for at least a few more months, if not longer. So we are delighted to have this panel who have agreed to come and spend time with us. Our first panelist is Dr. Naren P. Rao. He is a professor of psychiatry from NIMHANS, and many of you may even be familiar with him. He was a faculty member at the Center for Neurosciences at IISc, and his interests are in the areas of neurobiology of schizophrenia, as well as many other psychological and psychiatric issues. Our second panelist is Dr. Geetha Desai, who is also from NIMHANS, a professor of psychiatry from NIMHANS, and she has enormous experience and expertise in perinatal psychiatric issues. And the third panelist for today is Dr. Rishikesh Behere. He is a psychiatrist based in Pune. He was formerly at Manipal University in Manipal before moving to KEM Research Hospital in Pune. He is also a Wellcome Trust and DBT India Alliance Fellow. So I wholeheartedly welcome all the three panelists today who have agreed to spare their time with the IISc community. And today we will begin our session with a short presentation by Dr. Rishikesh and followed by various questions that IISc students and committee members have sent it to us via the form that we have circulated. So much of the session will be interactive. We will focus on trying to address your questions and trying to see how it helps. And towards the end, if we still have time after having addressed all the questions that we have already received, there is an option also post questions in this forum via live event Q&A. So as and when the talk is progressing and as and when discussions are happening, you're welcome to post, but we will take the questions that have already been posted as a priority. But if there are questions that are related to what we are currently discussing, we will try to take them as well. So with those introductory remarks, I will not delay any further. So it's now over to Dr. Rishikesh.
Yeah, so good evening, everybody. Is the slides live now?
Yes.
Yeah, and I am audible?
Yes.
Yeah. So good evening, everybody. And at the outset, I would like to thank Dr. Vishwesha, Dr. Anil, and Dr. Naren for having arranged this and invited me to give a few remarks and talk to you all about managing time and stress. So I have been a researcher myself. I'm an India Alliance Intermediate Fellow, so I kind of understand the challenges that students and research students at IISc might be facing in these difficult times. And also I've had a lot of experience over the last 4 to 5 years in dealing with students from the IISer, Indian Institute of Science Education and Research at Pune, and helping a lot of students there dealing with their stress. So let's start off by understanding certain basic concepts in terms of managing time and stress. I always like to start with a story. So we all know the classic story of the tortoise and the hare, and being slow and steady has always been a mantra, and that is what we are always taught, that this is a virtue that is necessary to be successful in life. But the times that we live in are really very different from the Aesop's fables. So we know that the early bird catches the worm. Publish or perish is the research environment that we live in. We are always living from one grant to the another. And there's always that kind of pressure that only a positive experimental result is a result. Negative results are not seen that well. So there's all these things build up a lot of the environment itself can become stressful, and this requires a kind of a paradigm shift in to look at the way we look at things. And coming to this year 2020, I don't know who made this prophecy, but 2020 has been looked upon as a year of the doomsday, and seems that a lot of things are now coming true. So there's a lot of uncertainty about what is going to happen in the next few months. There's a lot of students are not on campus; they are forced to be at home, and from home having to do expected to do a lot of things that they otherwise would have done on campus. There's a disruption of a lot of plans that you all might have had, both in terms professionally, research-wise, and academic-wise. I can definitely say for myself that I am also experiencing the same thing, because my research project, we are actually in the middle of our data collection, and everything has now come to a standstill, and we don't know how long this is going to go. This brings us to a very fundamental question, that what is stress? So if you look at it purely from a physics point of view, we know that stress is force per unit area and stress. So, I mean, applying similar concepts, we can say that stress is any event or condition or factor that imposes demands on your body. It could be physical or mental, to change and adapt to a new situation. So any situation that requires you to adapt or change things that you need to do imposes some kind of a stress. So I think the key word here to note is adapt. So who is affected by stress? Okay, so if you just take an example, there are 100 students who wrote a board exam. How many of them will develop stress? So this depends upon a lot of number of vulnerability factors, such as some people may have a genetic predisposition to be affected by stress. Some people have certain personalities that make them more predisposed. Some people, it depends on the environment that they live in. But different people react to in different ways to stress. So you can take a very simple example to see, if a force is applied on a glass, it is going to be very brittle and shatter very easily. If the same amount of force is applied to a metal rod, it may not break, but it may just have a dent. But if the same amount of force is applied to a sponge, it will just absorb all that energy and bounce back. So just to highlight that each individual will have different qualities and will absorb the stress in different ways. So, I mean, right now what we are actually seeing is a very classic theory of evolution being played out, survival of the fittest. There's a sudden change in the situation, and the situation demands that we adapt to it. Okay, and people who are adapt to it will survive. So is stress always bad? Right. So there's a concept called as U stress or positive stress. So if you have to plot a graph between performance and stress level, we find that during the initial periods, as stress increases, the performance actually may improve, and there is an optimal level of stress which brings out the best in you. This is something that we all may have experienced, that a couple of days or a week before the exam, you will suddenly find your focus getting better. You were able to remember things better, and that is when you are at your best. That is so that is called as eustress, where the stress is having a positive effect. But whenever stress is continued, persistent for a long period of time, it invariably will have its negative effects, and then this is called as distress. And there is a very core biological phenomena that happens due to the effects of stress. These are mediated through certain hormones, which you call as the stress hormone and the cortisol. Stress is known to lower your immunity by influencing cytokines, and so it's not a good idea in these times to have a low immunity. And stress also has a direct effect on certain chemicals in the brain, which are called as neurotropic factors, which are responsible for memory and general functioning and growth of the brain. So from a psychological point of view, there's this concept given by Carl Albrecht, who defined different types of stress based on different situations. Okay, so he classified them as time stress, anticipatory stress, situational stress, and encounter stress. And he gave the classic statement that the best way to manage stress is to understand it. So today, let us focus on this concept of time stress, because that is our topic for today. So time stress is basically when somebody is worrying about time or the lack of it. Person who is experiencing time stress would worry about the number of things that you have to do, fear that you will fail to achieve something which is important. So in a sense, a kind when a certain amount of task needs to be done in an X amount of time, that kind of builds up a kind of a pressure or a pressure of a deadline, that I have to get this task completed. And if it is not done, what are going to be the consequences of it? Will I be able to do it? Do I have the ability or capacity to do it? So these are some of the kind of experiences or thoughts that go on in our mind that build up this time stress. So what are the signs that somebody may be facing a time stress? So, so essentially, the person experiences a kind of a fear, which many times may be excessive and irrational. Excessive because it is out of keeping with what the situation demands, and irrational because sometimes the person also knows themselves that I don't know why I'm worrying so much. I think I can do this, but still there is this fear and anxiety that the task may not be completed, or there may be a fear that the task may be imperfect. This a lot of times leads people to focus on excessive and unimportant things, which leads to the time not being used effectively. And two things that very commonly everybody experiences: one is procrastination, and two, easy distractibility, which does not allow them to focus on the task at hand. So what are the symptoms of stress that one may experience because of this? Okay, so there can be increased heartbeat, there can be a sensation of difficulty in breathing, a tightness in the stomach, kind of a sense of doom that something unknown and something negative is going to happen, feeling overwhelmed with the situation, not seeing hope that things can turn out better, negative thoughts about self in the future, and the most obvious thing that when it comes to attention is when somebody experiences a loss of sleep or a loss of appetite because of this stress. So what happens when there is a time stress? So the time stress, the stress factor brings about certain changes in the way we think and the way we behave. The common things, the types of thought processes that go on in our mind is planning my time is going to take too much of my time. So it's a waste of time to actually plan things. That itself is going to take a lot of time. I better not do it. I'm very busy. I don't have the time. Some people may not really be that busy, but they act busy because it gives them a kind of a confidence that the busier I feel that I am, the better I'm using my time. But what actually is the output of it, or what actually are you achieving by it, is not a question that many people ask themselves. And this stress also leads to certain changes in their behavior. A lot of these behaviors are maladaptive ways of coping with that stress. So common ones are that somebody may start avoiding doing the things. I don't need to do this, or there may be a sense of procrastination. I will do it later, not now. There may be a kind of defiance that may set in. Why do I need to do this? What is the point of doing this? Why am I given this task? And a lot of times people may also take the help of substances like caffeine, sugar, alcohol, or nicotine, and may kind of dilute themselves into thinking that I get more done in more time when I wisely use these substances. As a result of this, the stress related to time management can have a lot of negative impact. The most the one thing that is very commonly seen is that people are not able to devote enough time to do the things that are important for themselves. So you have a deadline, you have an X number of things to be done in a given amount of time, and when we don't manage that time properly, we always end up in a situation where we feel that the time is never enough. And when that happens, we exclude a lot of things that are also important to us besides work, and we neglect them. So some of these things are self-development. So it's a very common refrain that I don't have the time to do things for myself. It could be any kind of upgrading your skills. It could be learning some new things. The second factor, which is often a casualty because of this, is interpersonal relationships. You may have a partner, you may have a spouse, you may have somebody with you, and there's always this tendency to think that they always demand my time, and I don't have that time. And a lot of time you may end up ignoring people who, family members or your partners who may be equally important, or it may be important emotional and social support. So during times of stress, when you actually need them, because you have distanced them, you may not have that buffer or that support system. Third thing is caring for physical health. Especially in these times, exercise, keeping yourself physically healthy is very important. It's a very common excuse that we always hear, that I never have the time to exercise. And the fourth thing is your interests, your passions, your hobbies. Somewhere they always take a back seat. So one may ask, what's that? I never have the time for that. And as I mentioned previously, that use of substances such as alcohol, smoking, or weed, there's always this misconception that it may help me focus, and sometimes that becomes a starting point for various substance use problems. And somehow people always find the time for that. So how do I handle this stress related to issues of time management? Obviously, one of the answers is to manage your time better and effectively. So what I will talk about is some very simple techniques that we can adopt in our day-to-day life. So these include learning how to handle procrastination, setting priorities, setting short goals, and effectively setting priorities and effectively managing that time. So procrastination is the syndrome that I will do it later. This is something that all of us at some point of time always experience. There are two factors that essentially guide procrastination. First is motivation. If you're not motivated to do a certain task, or if you don't understand, why is this task important for me, or why is this, or what is the benefit that I will get out of this task, so you will not find the motivation to do that task. And once you don't have the motivation, you will always have that one will always have the tendency that let me do it later and not right now. So it's important to ask ourselves this question, that is this task important, and why is it important for me, and why do I need to do it? If you can answer that question, you will automatically find that motivation to do that task, and then procrastination is not a factor. The second thing that drives procrastination is anxiety. Unknown to a lot of people, a lot of people around may just think that this person is lazy, or this person is always needs to be pushed to actually do a particular task. But actually, there may be an underlying anxiety which makes the person to postpone the task. So anxiety could be that I cannot do this, I'm not good enough to do this, I better not do it because I don't know what will be the consequence of that. These are very common. So understanding what are the thoughts and a reaction to these thoughts to a large extent will help in dealing with procrastination. The second is prioritizing tasks. Okay, so you have an X number of things that you need to do in a specified time, but everybody's time is limited, and so we need to prioritize our tasks based on certain criteria. So this is a technique which is called as the Eisenhower matrix. It's named after Eisenhower, the president of the United States, and it is said that he used these techniques whenever during his as his lifestyle, whenever he had to make certain decisions. So this involves identifying what are the tasks that you need to do, making a list of priorities of those tasks, dividing then those tasks into subtasks, and then dividing those tasks into these quadrants. So if you look at the figure on the right side, you can see that there's a 2x2 table. Okay. And in the top hand, it says, is the task urgent or not urgent? And on the rows, if you see, you can see that is that task important or not important. So you can either have a task which is important and urgent, or important and not urgent, not important and urgent, not important and not urgent. If you're able to classify your tasks in this manner, it becomes easy for you to prioritize and then be able to decide what tasks you need to do first and what tasks you need to do later. So let us just see a simple example as to how you can do that. Okay, so let's say that you have 4 tasks to do this weekend. Okay, so one is there's a conference abstract, there's a deadline on Monday that you need to submit. At the same time, there is also a departmental presentation that needs to be done, which is also on Monday. There's your friend's birthday and you need to call that friend and wish. Okay. And you have been window shopping and you found some things which you added to your cart on Amazon, which you always wanted to buy. So let us try and see how you can fit these 4 tasks into this 2x2 table. So the first task, which is a conference abstract. So there is a deadline. You can't change the deadline, so it has to be done at that point of at that time. So it is urgent and it is important. A departmental presentation on Monday. Okay. It is urgent because there is a deadline again, but not as important as the conference abstract. So something which is urgent and important, you do it. Something which is urgent and not important, you delegate it. You can ask a friend, you can ask one of your juniors to help you out in preparing that presentation properly. So you divide your task so that it doesn't feel that overwhelming. Having to call a friend to wish birthday is again important. You don't, because that person is a close friend, but it's not urgent. That is something that you need to do right away and immediately. So you schedule it for a later point of time. And last comes the shopping. Do I really need to do it? Not urgent and it's not important. I may want to eliminate it, or I may want to again schedule it for a later point of time. So this is a very simple technique that can be easily used in your day-to-day work to be able to prioritize your tasks. So next is something called as the Pomodoro technique. So Pomodoro is basically it's a species of tomatoes, and and this technique comes from the timer that is used in the kitchen. So if you classically look at the kitchen timers, they are in the shape of a tomato, and it has 2 parts which you can slide over one another, and it acts as a timer. So that is where this the term and this name is derived from. So what this technique basically says is that human attention span and concentration time is limited. Okay? So you cannot work very effectively for long stretches of hours. And for you to become effective, you need to break down your tasks into short segments. So what is recommended is that, and what is scientifically known, is that 25 minutes is a good time for which somebody can sustain their attention span. So break your task into subtasks. so that which you can accomplish in 25 minutes. After that, give yourself a break of 5 minutes and then go on to the next task of 25 minutes. Do this for 4 cycles and then give yourself an extended break of 15 to 30 minutes. And it's important that in those 5 minutes, you reward yourself for having accomplished what you have done. It could be something it could be very small. In 5 minutes, you listen a song that you like, or in the 5 minutes, you go to the fridge and grab something that you like. So small rewards, okay, but reward yourself for having accomplished what you set out to do in those 25 minutes. So if you see the net effect over a period of 2 hours is that you have effectively worked in short breaks of 4 cycles, and you have actually accomplished 4 subtasks. And at the end of the day, if you look back and what have I accomplished today, and you see that you have actually been able to complete the subtasks, it gives you more confidence for the next day to be able to and build on that confidence and accomplish more tasks. So the key thing here is that dividing your task into subtasks, doing it in short bursts of 25 minutes each, and rewarding yourself for having accomplished those. The next technique is something called as Pareto's principle. This is based on Pareto, who was an Italian economist, and he observed that 80% of land is owned by 20% of the people, and this is called as the 80-20 principle. And subsequently, it was found that this applies to a whole lot of life's scenarios. And so, if you have to apply this to your time management, okay, so what you'll find is that 80% of your output will come from 20% of your time. So this is actually very true. So, if you take a day's work, it's only actually 20% of the whole day's work that actually is productive and which gives 80% of your output. Right? So, so make sure that you give that 20% of your time every day and make it productive, and use that 20% of time using that previous Pomodoro's technique so that you can actually get work done. So I'll give you 2 small real life case scenarios, okay, which probably may help you understand, the kind of things that people actually do face. So this is the first case is somebody whom I saw a couple of months back during the lockdown time. He consulted me via an online video consultation. So he was a 27-year-old IT professional. He prior to this, he was working from office, so he found that he was able to get things done there. But now, when there was a sudden change of having to work from home, he was finding it very difficult. So his time was going away in watching Netflix and gaming. At night, he realizes that he has not completed his deadlines and then has to stay up the whole night to finish that work, which again he found difficult. And his work was below par. He was being reprimanded by his managers for not sticking to deadlines. So with these issues, he consulted. So actually, but when we went back and we saw that the issue was not only working from home, but even when he was working from office, he had certain issues. But because he was in a group and he was constantly interacting with people in the group, there was some kind of a control, or there was some kind of a watch over what he was doing, and he found that in that kind of a structured environment, that he was able to perform. But when he was suddenly working from home, he was in a very unstructured environment. So that is a very common theme that we are noticing nowadays. That when you have to work from home, it is difficult for people to enforce that same amount of discipline in that unstructured environment. So when we evaluated him, we found that he was having difficulty focusing on the task at hand. He was easily distracted by more stimulating tasks. It is not as if he was not using his time, but just that he was using his time watching Netflix and gaming, because he found those tasks to be more interesting and more stimulating than the work that he had to do. And on proper evaluation, we found that he actually had a diagnosis of attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. He was treated with medications and with behavioral therapies, and these techniques were explained to him, which he tried to implement in his day-to-day work. And over the last 1 month, he has reported that he has been noticing significant improvements in his productivity, and that he's now able to kind of stick to his deadlines, and at least he's not received any negative feedback over the last 1 month about his work. The second case scenario is somebody I saw over the last year. So he was a basic science PhD student at Central Institute in Bangalore. He was in his 5th year of PhD. So his family was basically from Pune, and so that is how they consulted me. So, so he had completed all his experiments. He had kind of finished writing his dissertation. There were only 2 chapters that were left, and he had kept these 2 chapters pending for the last 3 years, and he never got to starting it. Sought multiple deadline extensions, and he was in a relationship. And finally, at the end of this, his fiance called off their relationship. He was not showing any kind of commitment towards his career, and there was a lot of pressure on her and her family to get married, and that again a lot of it added to his stress. So what he showed was severe procrastination and avoidance towards getting his task completed. So on evaluation, we found that there was a lot of fear in him, that he was excessively anxious about his future. He felt that once the PhD phase is over, life is going to be very uncertain, and what am I going to do? So that anxiety and that fear actually prevented him from completing his PhD, which was almost done. There was just a very small part of it which was remaining, but that anxiety was so severe that it led to so much procrastination and avoidance. He was diagnosed with generalized anxiety disorder, treated with medication and cognitive behavior therapy. And we were successful in getting him back to go back to his parent lab, rejoin his parent lab. He kept in touch with me over online sessions over that period. And luckily he was able to submit his PhD, and now he has a job at an MNC in Bangalore and is doing well. But of course, we could not get his fiancé to come back. Right. So coming to the end, I mean, we started with this story of the hare and the tortoise. So I mean, the point that I would like to make here is that doesn't matter whether you're a hare or a tortoise, but you need to be a smart hare or you need to be a smart tortoise, and see what works for you the best. You could be a tortoise who's on steroids, or you could be a smart hare, that manages their time effectively. Does it in if you go back to that hare and the tortoise story, you could still have the hare running in short bursts, managing that time, taking breaks in between, taking rest, but still ending up at the finish line. I mean, so the bottom line is that it is possible for both can win, as long as you're a smart hare or you're a smart tortoise. So we all understand that we are in a difficult situation, but it is a difficult situation that brings out the best in us. Okay. So the key thing is to be able to adapt to a new situation, to be able to devise new strategies and techniques, with which we will all be able to be winners in the end. So in the end, I would just like to direct you to this. So I'm associated with an organization, a non-profit organization for mental health awareness. So we have developed this website, which is called as mentalhealthandyou.in, which gives a lot of information about different mental health aspects. And there is also a self-test that you can take, which guides you towards what kind of issues you may be having and what kind of solutions and problems may help you. Okay, so thank you for your patient listening, and I hope that this has been worth your time, and I would be happy to take any questions. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Rishikesh. That was really interesting presentation covering very useful techniques and issues that we all face. And I think one comment my own side as a faculty member, and I'm sure many other faculty members also agree with me that the time management is not an issue that only students face. in the early stages of their career, but actually almost every one of us at different stages to face. So, the various strategies to cope with uncertainties and manage our times is sort of ongoing and daily challenge for most of us. So this was a very very useful presentation. So as I had mentioned earlier, what we will now do is we'll go over various questions that people have asked, and we have also received about 5 questions in the live event Q&A. There is one question that I will quickly take up, which is are there any online tools like or apps which one can use to implement these techniques in daily life? Rishikesh, would you like to say anything about that?
Yeah. So I mean, there are these apps, a lot of apps that are available, which help you to make to-do lists and divide your to-do list into subtasks. But I can also direct you to certain. So there's a website called as Mind Tools, and that's a good website that has a lot of resources and worksheets and information that can be used. There's also another website which is called as ADD ADDMAG. Okay. So that website is specifically for people with attention deficit problems, but it gives a lot of resources with regards to time management, because a lot of because a large part of the behavior therapy for people with ADHD is time management. So, but a lot of those resources can be used by other people as well. So these are 2 resources that you can have a look at.
Okay. As and when you have time, there is a chat box, not a chat box, the live event Q&A. Would you mind typing the URLs for these websites? As and when you find time. On the
Yeah,
right side, you should be able to find this. Okay. That
sure.
way, all of our attendees can access these websites and take a look, and including the one that you mentioned at the end of your slide. That's
Sure,
also
yes.
really useful.
Sure.
Yeah. So let me now start taking questions that were submitted. When we sent out the announcement. So the first few questions, they all concern about scheduling, and I believe to some extent you have already covered, many of them. So I will just go over a couple of questions and then you can give your comments. The toughest thing for me is setting up my schedule. Lately, I have been whiling away my time, not by watching YouTube, but just doing nothing. I sense that the problem is I don't associate home with a place where you work. How can I tackle this problem? So this is one problem from one of the questions we have received. And second question, which is related, is that execution of plan. One was, as you said, scheduling itself. The other is, I am never able to finish my to-do list or the plan things that I plan for the day. And even though we plan our time, it becomes difficult to execute the plan. How to practically execute the time management plan?
Yeah. So shall I go ahead with these?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So I think the first question was a very interesting one, because I think there was a mention made about that I don't associate home with work. So yeah, I mean that is something that all of us are now experiencing. I mean till now we always used to say that never mix work with home. Keep work outside your home. But all of a sudden we find that work is actually invaded our homes. And home is now the school, home is now work, home, and home has ceased to be a home. So yeah, I mean, for that, I mean, I can give you a simple example of something that I have actually used for my own son, who has online classes. So we made it a point that he follows the same routine that he would otherwise have done if he was attending school. The only difference is that you're at home and you're not actually going to school. So he has to arrange his bag with his as per his timetable. The night previously, he has to sleep on time, wake up on time, and take his school bag, which is from his room, into the hall where he sits for his online classes. at the end of the class and arranges his bag again and brings it back to the middle room and keeps it there. So it's something which is, I mean, it's a very small and simple thing, but actually, things like that you have prepare a routine for yourself, which is not very different from what you would do if you were actually working. The only difference being that you're not physically traveling out of home, but in your mind space and mentally you do not disturb that routine that you would have otherwise followed. So that is one suggestion that I can give here. The second one was about that I cannot finish the to-do list that I have prepared. So, I mean, one thing that you need to also see and ask yourself is this to-do list that I've prepared, is it practical? A lot of times we end up making to-do lists which are impractical. In our zeal or this thing, usually at the end of the day, we think that I can get 10 things done. But if you look at the Pareto's principle, so 80% of your things happen in 20% of the time. So what is really feasible and what is really practical? So if you make an impractical to-do list, it will never be done. And once it is not done, it affects your confidence for the rest of the days of the week. So one way would be to start with lower expectations from yourself. Do things which which you think that you can practically do, and then build up on that, and then gradually increase your to-do list with more complexity and more number of items on your list. And I think the third one was about how to practically execute. So some of that we have covered. So prioritizing things, dividing them into subtasks, and using these two techniques of the Pomodoro technique, the prioritization Eisenhower's technique, and the Pareto's principle, I think would help. And in addition, also look at what are the tasks that you are setting yourself out to do. What is your motivation levels to be able to do that, to do those tasks? Do you have what are your thoughts and emotions behind these tasks, and are you experiencing any kind of an anxiety about these tasks? So these are certain questions that we need to ask ourselves before we set our priorities.
Thanks, Rishikesh. That was helpful. Now, I personally myself end up making to-do lists which are almost never go beyond 50% of what I anticipated to do. So I think we almost always overestimate how much we can accomplish given certain duration, right? So a few more questions now. One student is very concerned about the lack of productivity. The need and the desire to follow things about the ongoing pandemic is such that I find it impossible to focus on my work. I try to keep a specific time for following the news, but it just does not happen. I think I work for about 1 to 1.5 hours a day, certainly not more. There are days where I don't even work. So therefore, my question is, I'm not sure how to compartmentalize things here. I want to be able to work and follow news as well, but it's just not happening. Okay, that's one question. And then there are a couple of related questions that have come on in the chat box. So I will ask, say them as well. How to concentrate on current task. Generally, I'm physically present. My mind is somewhere else. I'm not presently present. Something else keeps running my mind. And another related question, which happens in research, right? I lack the, sometimes we lack the motivation to do things. So how do we sort of focus and, drive ourselves?
Yeah. So would you like me to take that, or
yeah, sure.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, so with regards to the motivation, the one thing that drives motivation is, answering the question that why am I doing what I'm doing? That question is very important, because unless you see the purpose behind, what I'm doing, so for example, if it's a research question, and this is a hypothesis that is something that is really close to my heart, and this is something which I really need to find, or this is something that and unless you link it to some kind of a tangible outcome, the tangible outcome may be a conference abstract, or it could be a publication that I can get out of it. It could be something that helps me in the next grant. So I mean, so you need to tie it to some kind of a tangible outcome which you can see as a reward. So ultimately, I mean, we are all animals. Unless we see a reward in what we are doing, you will not get the motivation. So, and a lot of times the rewards are not something which are very obvious, but we need to create one for ourselves. So that is something I can say about motivation in terms of tasks. And I think the other questions were also again about prioritizing tasks, and so I think that we have covered in the presentation.
Okay. Thank you very much, Rishikesh. So we now have a couple of questions with slightly different kind of issues. For many people at home, it's an entirely new environment. So one question is about how do we manage our time, deadlines, and prioritize work when we have small children. Especially with women, this is really a tough task, and we end up being pulled in different directions, and eventually end up with guilt either way. And a related question is on. It's almost an identical question that has come in the chat box. Under the lockdown scenario, those who are staying on their own need to accomplish daily chores along with research and professional work. What if daily chores take up a chunk of the day and leaves someone exhausted to accomplish anything else? How to tackle such a situation? And I would like to invite Dr. Geetha Desai to address this question. Hello, are you able to hear me? I think Dr. Geetha may have gone offline, is it right? So I have a feeling that Dr. Geetha may have a network issue. Is Naren and or other panelists able to hear me?
I can hear you. I'm just trying to contact.
Okay. So maybe
Are you offline?
So if it's going to take time, we can go to a next question on a
I think that is better.
Yeah.
Dr.
And as soon
Geetha
as
will
Dr.
join back.
Geetha join, we will take up our question. Yeah, that's great. Yeah. Okay. So other questions relate to sleep schedule. Okay. So in this lockdown, my sleep cycle has changed abruptly. I used to wake up 9 to 10 a.m. and again take a nap at around 4 to 6 p.m. and then go to bed very late at 4 a.m. So I tried many times to fix, but I failed. I left no stone unturned to stay awake and at afternoon, but I just can't. Can you suggest me some possible way to fix this? And again, a related issue. I usually sleep late and wake up late. This negatively affects my work. I try to sleep early, wake up early, but even if I try to manage, it is not sustained for a long time. How can I sleep early, wake up early, and maintain the schedule properly? So I will request Dr. Naren Rao to take this question.
Sure. See, each individual will have a different sleep-wake cycle. It's many times it's biological, so that it varies from person to person. Roughly, we can classify sleep cycle as some people are larks, that is, they're more active early in the morning. Some people are owls, they are more active in the evening. Okay, so you don't have to consider something as a this is the right way of sleep cycle. So, but primarily you have to maintain one pattern of sleep cycle. It should not be changing again and again. Coming to the specific question, what you have asked, it looks more like what you need is a good sleep hygiene. Okay, so what I get from the question is that you're having bits and pieces of sleep. For example, if you're sleeping between 4 p.m. to 6 p.m., 2 hours of sleep in the evening, you will definitely not get a good sleep if you sleep in the night, or even if it's like 10 o'clock or 11 o'clock. So one important thing is you should sleep only at a fixed time, and to set the cycle back, maybe fix the time to get up from the bed. Okay, regardless of what time to go, you go into the bed. So if you can do this for 2-3 days, okay, then your body will know that what time you need to get out of the bed. You will be awake. So once you are awake, don't go back to sleep. So just continue doing things. So usually a good physical exercise will help you to make your attention and concentration become better early in the morning, and then avoid sleeping during the day. And one other important thing, because of the work from home scenario, is that many times you may be sitting on your bed or sitting on your couch and doing rest of the things, but your body thinks that you are about to sleep. That's why you are sitting on the bed. So don't use bed for any other work other than the sleep, and preferably sit and do your work in a different place other than your bedroom. The other important thing is also that if you have a high screen exposure or a bright light, then it gives an indication to your body that it is still a day. So, and we are all not used to sleep in the day during daytime biologically, so we may not get a good night's sleep. So it is very important that you avoid any stimulants like maybe caffeine, cola, other things in the later part of the day. So for example, after 6 p.m. And then also you avoid watching movies in a binge or watching Netflix in a binge or doing things on the mobile screen after you switch off the light, because that's now the most common thing. So you naturally your mobile screen will be more brighter than what it used to be. So it will give more and more brightness. So a good sleep hygiene will actually help you to set your sleep issues. Um, it will take initially few days, but then once the cycle is set, it usually will run better. So a warm water bath is another thing which will help people to get into sleep. So maybe like 2 hours before the intended time to go to sleep, you can take a light meal and then take a warm water bath, and then maybe go for a walk, do some physical activities so that you get a good night's sleep. Coming to the second question, if your sleep cycle has always been like you sleep late and get up late, then it may not be a good idea to just change your sleep wake cycle at this juncture. When so many other things are happening, it's not a good idea to try to change somebody's natural sleep wake cycle. On the other hand, if it is something which has happened off late because of the COVID, then one of the reason may be the maladaptive sleep pattern. Okay, so following a good sleep hygiene should help. Avoid taking stimulants. That is one of the most common reason, because unknowingly you may be drinking or eating things which may be keeping you awake.
Thank you, Naren, for your answers. Is it okay? So there is a question that is there's a general question that is there on of our chat box. I want to take that and ask that, which is, are the strategies present in the mentioned in the presentation work universally well for all personality types? Are the strategies attuned to the working strategies of individuals? Can I ask this question to Rishikesh?
Yeah, so these techniques are general principles that help most people, because these are general techniques which would help about prioritizing tasks and about scheduling your and how to use your time. But but individually you need to see what works best for you. Yeah. Even when you talk of time, like just like how Naren mentioned just now, that everybody's sleep cycle is different. So similarly, everybody's productive times or effective times may be different. Somebody works are best in the morning, somebody are best in the nights. Some people, for some people, it works for them to work at a stretch for a given period of time. For some people, it works to work in short spurts multiple times in a day. So from that angle, you need to see what works best for you, and so that's why the last slide that I showed about the hare and the tortoise. Both hare and the tortoise can win, but you need to be smart, be a smart hare and a smart tortoise. So I mean, so yes, these are general principles, but at the same time, you need to see what works best for you.
Thanks, Rajikesh. There are a few questions related to anxiety. Okay, how do I not get overwhelmed by the progress made by my peers in their respective projects, as I'm finding it very difficult to focus? And there is another question, which is about the fact that there is a lot of uncertainty in when the institute will open back, and we are worried about our completion of project on time, which affects our mental health and eventually the quality of work. And this ends up me questioning our abilities and demean ourselves. So how can we deal with such thoughts and this upcoming scenario? I would like to request Dr. Naren Rao to take this question.
Sure. Yeah. See, the general tendency has been in many people, whenever you are faced with the stress, is that one to anticipate and expect the worst possible scenario. But many times it will be a good idea to just uh, take a step back and see what are all the different possibilities that are available, rather than thinking that my experiment will definitely not go, or my experiment will not give me the actual results. So what will happen if I doesn't give me the good result? Okay, so this becomes a negative chain of thoughts. So it's very important to identify this negative chain of thought, and cut the chain of thought as early as possible. Over a period of time, what happens is this negative chain of thoughts, they become automatic, and they start coming intrusive. Okay, they intrude into your rest of the thought process. Okay, so it's important to replace this negative chain of thought. Many times it is also important to recognize that your mind sometimes tricks you. Okay, so it may only project only half of the truth and may not be the whole truth. Okay, so it may be helpful sometime to take a step back and then see what is the probability of this outcome happening, and what is the probability of rest of the outcomes. Okay, so is it like 100% it is not going to work, or is it 90%, 80%, or 50%? Sometimes it may also be a good idea to just discuss your worries with your colleagues, or with your friends, or with your supervisor, that these are real life scenarios. Okay, if you once you do this and then you still think that it's an actual problem, that my experiment may not be over in the given time because of these changed circumstances, then you will have to take a corrective measure. Okay, so identifying the problem many times will help you to overcome whether your worries are real, okay, or whether your worries are something which have been exaggerated because of your anxiety. So the many times the anxiety itself will make rest of the problems also look bigger. Okay, so it is more like if you are sitting in a dimly lit room, okay, inside your house, and you start wearing the cooling glass. Okay, so when you wear a cooling glass inside the house, rest of the things will look even dimmer. Okay, so it may not be the actual scenario. So many times it will be helpful to introspect, or take some counsel with one of your friends or colleagues. Okay. If still the anxiety is overwhelming, it is a good idea to start practicing some of the simple relaxation techniques. So there are many online relaxation tutorials to control your anxiety, or you can start aerobic exercise. Many people report a good run helps them. Okay, or going to a gym helps them. Swim helps them. Unfortunately, many of these outdoor aerobic activities may not be possible due to COVID. So indoor, you can think of doing an high intensity training, which may be aerobic, or it may be yoga, meditation, which may help you to cut down the anxiety.
Thank you, Naren. So I don't know if Dr. Geetha is back. I don't think she is back. So I will wait for those questions for a few more minutes. Few more questions. One of the, at once, there are two kinds of challenges this COVID seems to have put on us. At one stage, many of us don't associate a home with workplace. Therefore, we have issues, working at home, and there are lots of other issues that come up when you are at home, right? Additional responsibilities of being at home. The other extreme is, an isolation from the rest of our lab and so on. So there are some issues of those type. I will just read them out. I do not get a chance to interact with my lab members or my professor much. Actually, being a research student, most of my work is done on my own, and in between need to discuss with my guide. However, my guide is very busy, and my lab is also really small because it's a new lab, relatively new lab. Therefore, I feel a bit disconnected, although it was good and fruitful while we were all on campus. Even if I think of making a conversation, I do not get a topic. If I manage to get one, I feel why I should approach them first. So at times I feel alone, stuck with my research problem. How should I try to mitigate this issue? I know it's my mental thinking, but I have been facing this issue since a month. And a follow-up question, a related one. I feel lonely or disheartened during the evening time, especially. Um, so how can I tackle this problem, because I am unable to meet my good old friends, and I also feel quite jobless and aimless when I wake up in the morning. So and there are similar questions. I won't. Since we are slowly running towards short of time, and we have many questions. I won't read all of them. They all relate to, largely speaking, loneliness associated with the pandemic. I would again request Dr. Naren to address this question.
Sure. All the questions are very valid, and I'm sure these are not the problems faced only by the student community, but also the same problems are faced even in the work community. Okay, so at different levels. So man is a social animal. We are not wired to stay alone, but the pandemic has pushed us to stay alone. So these are some of the concerns that definitely props up, and especially depending on your previous lifestyle and your previous work style and your personality, many people miss this more than others. So there are no easy solutions, but many team building activities could be planned even virtually. Okay. So one of the concern which was expressed was I miss speaking to my lab mates, or there are no topics to speak, because when you meet physically, interact with each other, you may not be sitting and chatting with others, but you may just say hi and just speak for 1 or 2 minutes, which unfortunately doesn't happen when you're all isolated at different places. So some of the useful strategies which have been successful in a corporate kind of a setup, maybe tried even in the lab kind of a setup. So one thing is something which we advise, like a virtual coffee break. Okay, so that if you imagine if you are actually working in the lab. I'm sure I have seen many of the IISc labs go for a coffee together, so that you chat for 5 to 10 minutes, and then it may be only the students, or it may be with your supervisor. Okay, so something similar to that can be done, so that you schedule, you come with your coffee cup and then sit in front of the screen. You have multiple virtual platforms like Teams or Zoom or other things, so that you can use them and then discuss mainly non-course related issues. Okay, so that you don't miss out this. And then you can also start doing some of the things, like it may be a virtual book reading club, or it may be a virtual journal club, or it may be like you do something like each individual tells a storyline, and so that you try to build a story together, or try to make a drawing together. So primarily you need to do some kind of a team building activity. Okay. So if you don't feel that you are still in the same cohesive group, then the loneliness sets in. Okay, so you will have to make use of the available virtual platforms, and then see how well you can build and uh, keep in touch with the rest of your colleagues. So if you were in touch with these people when you were physically present, I'm sure the same people, it will not be difficult to reinitiate the contact virtually. So you just need to identify the topics which are common, okay, or the topics which are neutral. Okay, so there are few things which may be common to everybody. Okay, so some other activities are also played, like so it may be just trying to guess other person or a sneak peek into what the other person's routine has been in the last few weeks, okay, or what the other person is planning to do in the next 2 weeks, things like that. So keep the conversation going. Okay, so if you're not able to do this in person, at least start doing it virtually. Once you start doing things virtually, you will be able to reinitiate the contact. See, many times the mood fluctuations could happen at different time point of the day. Okay, if rest of the times you are fine, it happens only during a specified time. So just go back and see what were you doing before the lockdown at that particular time. So it may be the time that you used to chill out with your friends. It may be the time that you used to do something that you enjoyed. Okay, it was a pleasurable activity which used to happen at that particular time, or it may be the time that you are the most productive. Okay, so go back and see whether any alternate arrangement can be made to mimic that in any way, so that you engage in a different activity but it is still pleasurable, or whether you can do some productive work at that point of time. Okay. On the other hand, if you're sad at all the time, but the sadness worsens in the evening, or if there is any specific time of the day the sadness worsens, then it may be a sign of a clinical that the things are going down. Okay, so it may be a good idea to just speak to a okay, speak to a psychiatrist, or speak to your doctor, or speak to somebody if the sadness is persisting throughout the day. Okay, so if it is just a specific time point, many times it will be because of your routine pre-lockdown, in which case you will have to now identify some other activity which is, if not equally pleasurable, at least to some extent the same kind of a pleasure that gives. I guess it answers at least some of the questions that you asked.
Vishwesha, your phone is muted. Your line is muted.
Yeah, yeah, sorry. I hope people can hear me now. So we have a bunch of questions that are unfortunately pending because Dr. Geetha is unable to join for some reason. So I was wondering whether she's back now. Okay, excellent. I still can't see her among the list of presenters. Okay, there are a couple of questions that are related to specifically about how do we manage issues at home. For example, one question here relates to at home all day from last 3-4 months has made me frustrated. I'm kind of always angry, due to which I have started yelling at my siblings and mother. I feel embarrassed afterwards. Moreover, to make things worse, faculties in my department say our efficiency must be better as we are at home, and but I face a lot of problems at home. So how do I deal with this, my personal anger issues at home, as well as issues of managing my workload given the challenges? I would like if Dr. Geetha Desai is not here, I would maybe then request Rishikesh to take this question.
Yeah, I mean, so this is a, I mean, what this lockdown has done is that, you know, a lot of time, you know, we are suddenly find that we are in, we have to face situations where we have to also suddenly now manage interpersonal issues, you know, along with work, you know, because till now going away from home and, you know, to a different workplace actually gave us a kind of a compartmentalization, you know, wherein you could spend time away from people with whom you don't you know, may not get along with. But suddenly, when you find that you have to stay under the same roof and interact with people, and even I mean, and even before the lockdown, if you have not had good relationships with people, it is bound to put you in to conflict with those people. I mean, so I think we need to be mindful of these things. We need to be mindful that, you know, the experiences that we are having, probably all the other people with whom we are interacting also we would be facing similar issues. We also need to reduce our expectations, you know, because one of the key points of conflict in interpersonal things is when you have when the communication is not adequate, and B, when we have expectations from other people, and those expectations are not met, and, you know, that is commonly leads to conflict. So we need to be mindful of these two situations and scenarios, and you know, and if there are, I mean, kind of long-standing issues, it would actually help to seek professional help to see, I mean, what are the issues that are actually contributing to this. And in terms of this relationship issues, this is what that I can suggest.
Thank you, Rishikesh. So, you know, we have taken a bunch of questions, and, you know, we have a whole lot of questions we actually haven't been able to take. For example, just on the live Q&A, we have about 30 questions. I think we have addressed about, you know, maybe several of them in direct or indirect ways. So, so unfortunately, we will not be able to go through them, all of them. So, however, I would like to so we also have Dr. Ajit Bhide, who is one of the faculty who advises us at IISc Wellness Centre. He's a renowned psychiatrist, and so I would like to request him to answer one or two questions which I haven't been able to take up. So one couple of questions relate to managing work while being at home. And so I'll read out the actual question. How do we manage our time, deadlines, and prioritize when we have small children? Especially with women, this is a really tough task, and we end up being pulled in different directions. And we eventually end up with guilt either way. You know, we haven't done enough work at home, and we haven't done enough work at the professional you know, requirements as well. And a second one is from a student who says that there are difficulties at home that is making it impossible to make any progress in the research work. So how to deal with difficulties in terms of chronic health issues of health of loved ones at home, financial difficulties, as well as burden of aging parents, and how do I sort of tackle the responsibility of my PhD along with the you know, responsibilities at home. Dr. Bide? We're unable to hear you. I need to unmute yourself, I think.
Is that better?
Yes, that works now. Yeah.
Can you see me? I can't see me. I can see Rishikesh, now I can see you.
We can see you, yeah.
Okay. So I think that's a very common bind that we are in. I heard the earlier conversation and then I was cut off for some time, and people were talking about how to manage home and work at once. I think you need to get your priorities right. I think you need to enlist the help of family members, explain to them the situation. And I think precisely the question is about managing little children as well as the work, right? That was the first part of the question.
Yeah, that's right, yeah.
Yeah, so I think children are going to be, by nature, a little intrusive. They're curious. They're also very, very bored. So you make sure that you have adequate time spent with them prior to getting on to your work. And I think if most children are quite willing to understand, if you spend time with them, if you just say, no, don't talk to me now, I will not be able to address your issues, and don't spend time with them at all, it's not going to work out. I think you need to take time off, spend time with them, explain why this is important for you, whether you're doing your PhD or whether you're a faculty member taking a lecture. And children would generally be available and willing to understand. The smaller the child, the more difficult this becomes, without a doubt. Smaller children need you to give physical attention to them. So have them sit on your lap, do some fun things on the system for some time. Then gently ward them off, saying that now I have stuff that I need to do, because without that, we will not be able to get all the goodies that we want in life. And I think these kind of explanations usually work well if you have managed to invest enough time, energy, and manifest affection. Just implicit affection is not enough. Manifest affection is very, very necessary. So Vishwesh, I forgot the second part of the question. I found that very incisive.
The second part of the question was that, the feeling of the guilt that, that I'm unable to complete, do right job either at home or at the professional part of my life, compromising on both sides. That gives me guilt on both directions.
Right,
yeah.
Right. This too is not uncommon. Even without the pandemic, we have this kind of situation. The pandemic has definitely aggravated these dilemmas for us. And I think, again, there is a sense of, there is a need for prioritizing properly. So there's a nice line from a play which says, rather than do either, she'll do something else that neither likes at all. So in a similar way, you need to say this much time and this much energy goes into my work-related schedule, and this goes into family and home-related schedule. There's also a likelihood that you may sometimes need to change. Crises come up at the workplace, crises come up at home without any definite predictability. Managing crisis is a separate chapter by itself, but in non-crisis situations, allocating time resources adequately to each one is something which can be achieved. And if you've not been able to do it, do not expect a change overnight. It is not a magic wand that's going to transform things. Over a period of time, you will learn to give the right proportion of your time to the right activity. Also, I think these kind of problems get compounded, especially among young adults, when
Okay, I think there may be a network issue at Dr. Bidet's end. I cannot hear him speak anymore. Let's see if it fixes on its own for a couple of seconds. No. So maybe we'll ask one of the many questions we have received. So there are a few more questions about scheduling. I will request Rishikesh to answer them. One is okay. General question. Is it known or proven that following news is bad for health, especially mental health? That's one question. And the second one is, until there is a deadline, I delay all the important things, and I will not be able to finish and end up doing unimportant things. I get very nervous to start something unless it's urgent. Can you suggest something? Rishikesh.
Yeah. What was the first one again? Can you just repeat that?
Sorry, I mean, I just want 1 second, please.
Or something on news and mental health.
Is it proven or known that following news excessively causes mental health problems?
Yeah. Yeah, so news depends upon what kind of news that you're following. I mean, so in these COVID times, if you're kind of going to be excessively be immersed, you're going to immerse yourself only with information about the about COVID. So what happens is that it kind of so we are talking here about priorities. So that one singular issue takes up a lot of your mind space. So you're constantly looking out, what is going to happen next, what is the uncertainty, because a lot of times these news also do not give you the clear picture. The news ends up only kind of increasing your anxiety. A lot of times the sources of this news may not be may not be authentic sources. There's a lot of fake news also that is circulating. So it is things like these that may actually trigger anxiety in somebody who is already predisposed or who's already prone for anxiety. But if you're able to kind of compartmentalize and prioritize and be clear about how much time that you're going to be you're going to give for this particular activity of listening to the news. So then you would be able to manage your time as well as the kind of emotions that may be associated with the news more effectively.
Thank you, Rishikesh. By
Yeah.
the way, so we are so it's 5:20 now, and so we need to wrap this up. We still have a bunch of questions which are unfortunately we're unable to address all of them. Okay, but I guess one sort of general recommendation is that these sessions that we are doing are not an end in itself. Idea is to begin conversations about various issues that all of us face. And those are being exacerbated in the context of COVID. So the idea is that we would like to encourage the campus community members to use the facilities of IISc Counseling Center, IISc Wellness Center, which includes professional counselors, and they will be able to dedicate quality time with you to address and diagnose your issues. We have 2 counselors and 2 psychiatrists, and in some cases they are also available over telephonic meetings as well. Okay, so do make they are open like health center even during the COVID time. So and in addition, as you are also aware, we also have for many of the students who are currently not on campus, and you can also avail the counseling via those platform. So with that note, I would like to thank all the panelists today, Dr. Narendra, Dr. Rishikesh, and as well as Dr. Geetha. Unfortunately, we could not really
No,
hear Geetha
Dr.
because
Geetha is back.
Oh, is she back? Okay, I'm unable to
Dr.
hear
Geetha
her.
is back. If you would like to put some questions, it would be fine.
Unfortunately, I'm unable to see her though.
Yeah, she's online, so you can probably ask a question.
Arun, can you do this? Okay.
Yes.
Yeah. So Dr. Geetha is available. So this will be our last question for today, because our panelists also have other commitments. They need to move on. They're extremely busy people. So thank you very much. Okay, Dr. Geetha is here. So we had a few questions that we have discussed now, and this will be one of the last questions we'll discuss. So these are general questions. With uncertainty around us, with a lot of uncertainty around us, I do not see the point of doing research, especially that don't seem to have any direct relevance to COVID. So how do I, how do I manage my situation? I just don't have the motivation because I think COVID is the only important thing. I'm sure many researchers, I think, have faced this issue. This is important and representative question.
Yeah, I hope I'm audible, and sorry for not being able to be part of it. Am I audible?
Yes, we are able to hear.
Thanks for making me part of this panel, even though I'm so sorry about the technological aspects that went wrong. I think uncertainty is there even otherwise. I think we probably, because of the COVID, we feel that what isn't it? So I think it's important to, one of the main concern all of us have is finding a meaning and a purpose in our life, and how this meaning makes sense to, in day-to-day activities. Uncertainty is going to be there. Uncertainty is not just about COVID. Uncertainty is also about your job and other things. I think one of the strategies that have been useful in handling uncertainty is living in the moment and practicing mindfulness. I think staying in the present and focusing on here and now activities is very important, because what we do is what happens in next few months, few years is something. There are some things which are under our control and there are some things which are beyond under our control. And I think when we start addressing things which are beyond our control, it can make us feel very anxious, distressed, frustrated. So I think we need to focus on what are the things that are under our control, what are the things that we can deal with, and also probably living the present is much more important, especially in these uncertain times, is much more important than focusing on what is likely to happen in the future.
Thank you very much, Dr. Geetha. Let me ask you one question, which was partly addressed by other panelists before we wind up this session, because they were really, we really wanted your opinion. There were, questions on, how to manage home, responsibilities at home, especially with children, and managing work as well, and managing, responsibilities at home that is not just children but also aged parents possibly.
Yeah,
would you have any? This is really an area of expertise, so I would really request you to say a few.
Am I audible?
Now, yes.
Now, yes.
Yeah. So I think it's important, first of all, I think I did go through one of the questions which mentioned about feeling guilty, about not being able to be, good at home, or being a good mother, or, being good at work. There are a couple of things that I think the mothers probably have to prioritize. For example, if you're at work and then you start worrying about what's happening with kids, I think that's a complete, it can cause more frustration and anxiety. And at the same time, when you're at home, you are worrying about what is, my colleagues are doing very well and I'm not able to get as much time as they get, is something that probably adds on to a lot of guilt, because you're thinking of something else at work, but at the same time at home you're thinking about work. I think that is one thing. Second thing is about there are a lot of societal expectations on how a mother should be, that these are the things that mothers should do, mothers, whether irrespective of what kind of job. It's okay to have some career goals for yourself, and irrespective of which field you're in. It's not, and people might kind of criticize you for this, but I think it's okay to have career goals. And it's okay to, and it's the quality time with kids that's much more important than the quantity time. And try and get as much support from other people as possible. Don't hesitate. I think there's one of the things that adds on to the stress, especially in women with young children, is trying to do everything by themselves. I think there's a very good saying that it takes a village to raise the child. So take as much help as possible from other people. It could be grandparents, house help, anyone. But I know that in this COVID times, it can be a big challenge, especially when there are young kids at home and you have to work from home. I think that is something that it cannot be just solved by women alone. I think the other family members need to pitch in to help the mothers to actually finish the tasks at hand. And guilt is something I think is probably needs a little more work. Being trying to do everything is a big no, because I think gone are the days when women would be appreciated for multitasking. Multitasking is not good for our brains. Do one thing at a time, and then when you're doing something, remember that quality time is very important with kids than the quantity. And it's important to seek help. There is nothing wrong in seeking help. And sometimes it's when you're worried about too many things, it's important to just jot down what are the things that worries you the most. What are the things that actually you need to handle. Sometimes it's, your own thought process. You might be worrying so much, but when you actually write it down, it might not sound as anxiety provoking as it is. Okay.
Thank you very much, Dr. Geetha. So with that as the last question, we will wind up our session now. There are a couple of questions on, is this session recorded? I think the answer is yes. We will send the link to everyone, one of the recording, and then can we get the presentation slides? If the recording is available, if we have the consent of the speaker, we will also be able to share those with you. And there were also a few questions which were more of administrative issues. We just want to clarify that unfortunately we will not be able to address those from the Wellness Center. But of course, whenever we see some of those concerns, we communicate to them so that the deans and other academic administrations will pay attention to these issues and take necessary actions. With that note, I would once again like to thank everyone on the panel, Dr. Rishikesh Behre, Dr. Naren P. Rao, and Dr. Geetha Desai for taking their time. I would also like to thank Dr. Ajit Bide for joining us and for making very valuable comments. With that note, we would like to end our session. I will hand over to Professor Anil Kumar for final concluding remarks.
Thank you, Dr. Vishwesha, for managing the session so well. And it was a very wonderful event. I enjoyed it personally. I'm sure that the IISc community will get greatly benefited by this interactive session. Thank Dr. Rishikesh, Dr. Geetha, and Dr. Naren for your valuable comments. And we could also get Dr. Ajit Bide for a short while for his thoughts in this topic. And we will be continuing with this series once in 2 weeks. And the next event is coordinated by Dr. Bide, and that will be on stress management, managing stress during the times of COVID-19. So that will be the next topic. So there are many other activities that the Wellness Center is going to arrange. So please look at the emails that you will be getting from the Wellness Center for the future activities. So let me thank all the speakers and all the participants for this event, and all the people who asked questions in this panel was quite useful. Even the questions asked by some people are the questions which is faced by others as well. So in this regard, I thank all the participants, all the panelists, and Professor Vishwesha Guttal, and all the members of the Wellness Committee. In fact, he is our advisor in the Wellness Committee. Dr. Naren is an advisor in our Wellness Committee. So I thank all the committee members of the Wellness Center as well for this. So see you within next 2 weeks' time. Thank you all.
Okay.
Thank you.